Welcome back to the KrisCross Corner. On today's episode, I will be talking about sundown towns in Metro Detroit and their impact on development, physically and socially. KrisCross Corner starts now. Welcome back, everyone, to the KrisCross Corner. This is my weekly journal to educate, influence, and overall make you aware of what's going on around the world. You too can be a part of the creative process by joining the KrisCross Corner Facebook group. Send me suggestions on what I should talk about for upcoming episodes. Also, please listen and support the podcast on the Anchor app. With as little as $1 a month, your support on the app helps me make more episodes with my peeps or by myself, because I like to talk by myself most of the time. But if I want special guests, I can pay them, spread the love, go on trips with my peeps. You understand. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about what sundown towns are, and which ones are, are notorious, which ones were notorious, and which ones are still notorious today in the Metro Detroit area, of course. But first, we're going to start off with my new segment. What you doing, Detroit? What you doing? Man, Big Gretch is at it again. Big Gretch just ordered the indoor bars to close due to the spike of COVID-19. Some people just thought that COVID-19 was gone. However, it's been here the whole time. Just saying. But COVID never left, folks. We're talking about a first wave, second wave. It's still the first wave. Everybody's just going out at the same time now, and it's just getting worse and worse because you might have it, you might not have it. But we just got to keep people safe. And that's all Governor Whitmer is doing. She's just trying to keep us safe. She's trying to, flatten the curve or to get rid of the whole virus altogether. You know what I mean? But she's doing what she's doing, and she's doing the right thing. And I hope other governors around the country, Texas, Georgia, Florida, I hope they, follow in Gretchen's footsteps. Well, speaking of footsteps and steps in the wrong direction, I guess. Drive-by shootings in Detroit. Drive-by shootings in Detroit. Now, this is nothing new for people who live around Detroit. However, the new sensation in Detroit is drive-by shootings on the freeway. What in the living hell are y'all doing drive-bys on the freeway? Well, most of these incidents have been people who have been spotted out. So at least they know the person that they're shooting. They're just not randomly shooting at cars on the freeway. If that was the case, I wouldn't be on the freeway ever. But the state police reported a shooting on the Southfield Freeway, which is by my house, between 8 Mile and 7 Mile. So that's not really by my house, but it's in the vicinity. Now, they say they knew the person because, of course, no one's going to just randomly shoot a car. But that's just one incident. There was also one on the Edsel Ford Freeway, which is 94. There was one on 75. There was a few on 75, actually. There was 2 on the Lodge, and there was 1 on the Davison. Sources tell me. Now, I don't know what the Detroit police are going to do in response to all these shootings that are happening on the freeway, but hey, what you doing, Detroit? Come on now. Speaking of come on now, Cass Tech is not changing their name. So Lewis Cass, which was, one of the famous people for Detroit, apparently he was a slave owner. What's new? All right. All these injustices happening around the country about people getting shot and inequalities for us black folk and people of color. And all you want to do is change the name of a high school, tear down a statue, change the name of the Redskins, which we will get to. We don't care about the name. We care about the cops who killed Breonna Taylor, the cop who killed George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and numerous others around the country that have been in the news or have not been in the news. That's what we're trying to fight for. We're not trying to fight for a name change of a freaking high school who's been in Detroit for almost 100 years. Over 100 years, actually. We don't care. What we need to do is get justice for these people. Black lives matter. Not old slave owners who've been dead for like 100 years. Who cares? In other news for Detroit, there was a new Facebook group in Livonia called the Livonia Citizens Caring About Black Lives group. It's on Facebook. You can check it out. They raised about $1,800 in 3 days to put up a billboard along Telegraph. I believe it's the north. I saw it yesterday. Northbound Telegraph in 96, right by the exit. It says, and I quote, "Driving while black? Racial profiling just ahead. Welcome to Livonia." Oh, yes. Let me say it one more time. Driving while black? Racial profiling just ahead. Welcome to Livonia. Yes. Livonia. First of all, I'm an urban planner, so we're going to talk about the specifics of this billboard. Billboards are not allowed in Livonia for reasons that I don't know and I don't care. That's what the citizens wanted. They don't want big signs telling people what to do and where to go. Okay, that's reasonable. All right, switch it to the Advocate. Livonia is in Metro Detroit, has a history of being notorious for racial profiling. I have not been a victim of that racial profiling. However, I've had friends who've told me stories about the racial profiling in Livonia and numerous other cities around Detroit. Livonia has many other things that they're known for, but today we're going to talk about sundown towns and their effect on the way people live. And Livonia is one of those sundown towns. They want to be welcoming to everyone, trying to keep people coming into Livonia. Just don't be scared. It's okay. We want your money. We want you to live here. Just come through. That's what the Facebook group wants. However, most of us know that Livonia has a huge history of one, pulling black people over, two, of excluding them from housing, and three, they have a huge history of killing black people. And that's what we're going to talk about later today in the show. And that was the What You Doing, Detroit segment. Please follow the What You Doing Detroit Instagram page if you like photos and videos of Detroit. That's my Instagram plug. Now let's go to the news. The news. Business Insider said that Walmart is transforming its parking lots into drive-in movie theaters. Yes, I said it. 160 Walmarts are turning their parking lots into drive-in movie theaters this summer, which is the best idea they have come up with since the inception of their stores. I don't shop at Walmart. However, I will go to a Walmart drive-in theater if they have the right movies. Some movies are pretty good for a drive-in. All the Avengers movies could be good for a drive-in. The Dark Knight movies, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Harry Potter movies, Indiana Jones, except for the fourth one, because we don't talk about that. They could do a Back to the Future trilogy at one of these drive-thrus. Max Fury, that would be good. Born Identity, that would be a good movie to put there. What other movies should there be at drive-in theaters? There should be scary movies. I like scary movies at drive-in theaters. That would be great. The Purge, that could be a really great movie to showcase at one of these drive-in movie theaters. Yeah, but overall, it was a smart move by Walmart. They know what they're doing. They want that money rolling. Keep that money rolling in. Speaking of money rolling in, my boy from the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. Patrick freaking Mahomes signed the biggest football deal in history. Not just football deal. He signed the biggest sports deal in history. Sports. That's crazy. This guy has signed what was it? I'm looking it up right now. He signed 10 years, up to $503 million. Source ESPN. So basically, this man is making $50 million a year just on the NFL contract. That's not including all of the endorsement deals he has, all the commercials he does, and other stuff that he gets money for. Let me tell you how good this man is. I told all my friends for the Super Bowl this year that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to be losing most of the game. However, Patrick Mahomes is going to be like, hold my beer. I got this. And he did it in convincing fashion. Not only did they win the Super Bowl, they won the first Super Bowl in Kansas City history in I think it was 50 years, because I think they were part of the first Super Bowl way back in the 60s. They won a Super Bowl, I think, a few years later. And then 50 years later, they finally won again. That's crazy. But overall, the Kansas City Chiefs are still on everybody's radar this year. And based on this contract, they should be on everybody's radar for the next 10 years. It's crazy. Congratulations, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. Speaking of Chiefs, do you guys think that's a derogatory name, the Chiefs? Because a lot of people do. However, that's not as derogatory as, the Cleveland Indians with their logo way back in the day, aka 5 years ago, with the red man smiling. They took that away. We weren't taking that anymore. They also were trying to get rid of the Chicago, the Chicago Blackhawks, which is also quote unquote derogatory, which, I mean, I get it, but Blackhawks, that's like a dominant name. Like, we're going to dominate you on this ice. And we're going to smile with our 2 front teeth knocked out. Like, come on. But in recent news, FedEx, which is, I believe, has majority ownership of the Washington Redskins, has said, y'all better change this name. Y'all better change this name. We are not playing no games. So I don't know what they're going to change the name to. The Washington, I don't know, Washington Bullets. I don't. This is just it's crazy. Um, I don't know. It's gonna be weird calling them the another name, but with all change, you're gonna have to get used to it. So we're all gonna have to get used to it because they're gonna change it anyway. Speaking of getting used to, there are two stories that we have to get used to. Cedar Point is opening for the 2020 season on Thursday, July 9th, which is this week. You'll have to have a reservation, and I believe they're not going to full capacity at all. I think they're going to allow like 10,000 people. You're going to have to wear a mask. You're going to have to, I don't know what they're going to do at Cedar Point, but I'm not going this year. I ain't going nowhere that has to do with people and roller coasters. That's all I'm saying. Another story that, somehow sparked controversy, which I don't understand. I mean, I understand why, but I don't understand why. The NFL is planning to play the black, the Negro, lift every voice and sing the Black National Anthem before the games on week 1. Now, I don't know if they're going to do this for every game, but they said they're going to do it for week 1. It's a better song than the Star-Spangled Banner. Let's just be honest. However, we already don't want to hear one of the songs before the game. Now we got to hear 2? Come on now. That's my argument. However, the other side of the spectrum is saying we don't need to hear that song. That's not American. I'm like, first of all, yes, it is. It's very American. It's the people who built your country. They made their own song because the Star-Spangled Banner has some stuff in it that they took out that was pretty, pretty gruesome, pretty undermining, and pretty detrimental to people in this country. Lift Every Voice and Sing is like, it's amazing. It's just amazing. It's a great song. You should hear it sometime. I can't play it here because I'll get flagged. But it's really great. However, the song that's better than both Lift Every Voice and Sing and the Star-Spangled Banner is America the Beautiful. That song should be played everywhere. That is the most amazing song ever. And Ray Charles made the best rendition of that song. I believe I first heard it on The Sandlot when I was like a little kid. But it's a really great song. Really great. You can hang it, I don't know how they're going to do this. They're going to do Lift Every Voice and Sing, and then the national anthem? What a national anthem, then lift every voice and sing. Anyway, it's way better than the Star-Spangled Banner. These stories were brought to you by Mixtiles. Turn your photos into stunning wall art. They're beautiful. They attach easily. They're removable and reusable and leave no marks on your walls. Mixtiles are for my many travels across the country. I use them so much that I have an entire wall of Mixtiles of my travels. Thank you, Mixtiles. You can relive your best memories every day with Mixtiles. You can order Mixtiles online at www.mixtiles.com or use the Mixtiles app. That's the pink app. The pink app with 3 dots on it. Let's go get creative. Start snapping pics and printing them out and putting them on your wall with Mixtiles. All right, let's get to the major topic of the day. What are sundown towns? Now, if you look at a map of your city and the surrounding cities, do you notice why the cities look different? Of course, different city ordinances, different city laws go into all the stuff that cities do and the way cities are made. Um, Not just the arbitrary borders, but the physical and invisible borders. You ever wonder why the police presence is higher in certain suburban neighborhoods or certain urban neighborhoods? You ever notice why the police are located more heavier on certain freeways? Do you ever wonder why cities around Detroit are predominantly white and some are predominantly black? Well, that's where the term sundown towns come into play, ladies and gentlemen. Sundown towns, um, well, people still use them today around the country. Sundown towns are the towns that were intentionally around to keep certain kinds of people out. Either it be East European, sometimes in some cities, the Jews, foreigners, Hispanic and Latino. However, but it always meant Black and African Americans when it comes to the American story. Tactics would range from scare tactics to not serving the people properly, real estate frauds and not real estate fraud, but not getting people in the right houses they're supposed to be, saying that they can't go to this house, but they can go to this house because it's in an all Black neighborhood. You know that. They go from higher police presence, which means certain people won't want to be in that area, aka Blacks. Beating up people, lynching, multiple arrests, murder, or flat out just flat out racism. Just flat out racism. The metro area has the highest level of residential racial segregation in this country. Nearly 9 out of 10 Black residents in the Metro Detroit area, ladies and gentlemen, let me say that again. Nearly 9 out of 10, 90%, 9 out of 10 Black residents in Metro Detroit live in either 1, the Detroit proper, 2, Highland Park, 3, Inkster, 4, Pontiac, or 5, Southfield. Out of those 5, you have Detroit. You have Highland Park, which is an enclave in Detroit. Southfield, which is an inner suburb of Detroit. And you have the 2 outlying suburbs, which are Inkster and Pontiac. All right. If you look on a map, you can pretty much see where the majority Black cities are around Detroit. And the reason why they're there have deep historical roots. We'll go with that later in another episode, but we're just gonna do a little spark notes on the whole situation. I guess we're gonna talk about freeways deliberately went through the poor neighborhoods around the affluent neighborhoods of Detroit. So if you look at a map of Detroit, like I-96, 75, Lodge Freeway, Edsel Ford, they went through all these neighborhoods. They went through the poor neighborhoods, split them up, but they went around the more affluent neighborhoods because they fought against the interstate freeway building through their communities. So if you look at a map right now, search the history of the neighborhoods of Detroit, it's mind-boggling. and astonishing what they've done. And it wasn't just black neighborhoods. It was either the Polish neighborhoods, the Greek neighborhoods, the Irish neighborhoods. They went through everybody. But the people who had money, they was like, oh, you ain't coming through here, buddy. You're not coming through here. That's what happened. Speaking of running through, in the early 1960s, the people know about this. The city of Detroit conducted an urban renewal program to combat what was called urban blight back in the day, just areas that were just run down and underutilized, quote unquote, by the city because they just didn't take care of them because they had, quote unquote, undesirables in their city. The program raised the entire Black Bottom district, which was a majority Black community in Detroit. They just took it up, moved the people, displaced the people, and replaced it with, of course, everybody knows if they live in Detroit, they replaced it with the Chrysler Freeway, which is I believe it's 75 that runs around downtown. So you have the 75 that runs around downtown, and you also have the 375 connector, which connects Jefferson to Gratiot and the Chrysler Freeway. So they made those two freeways to get rid of the urban blight, which displaced a lot of people. And that's just one of the major stories in Detroit. That's just one of the major areas in Detroit that they took away. In the 1970s, Detroit lost a $500 million grant for public transit development because the suburbs refused to cooperate. They didn't want the Black people to come to their neighborhoods. They didn't want poor whites to come in their neighborhoods and bring their property values down. They didn't want connectivity for all in the Detroit area. That's the major reason why Detroit doesn't have a mass public transit network like New York City, Washington, D.C., or Chicago. It's because Detroit, as well as the Detroit suburbs, were against one another. And they still are to this day. Of course, everybody knows about the redlining and intentional racist practices that kept Blacks away from predominantly white neighborhoods and cities. There was a source that one couple reported that their real estate agent repeatedly refused to show them houses in executive and exclusive Grosse Pointe neighborhoods. Instead, they told them to go to Harper Woods, which is another inner ring suburb of Detroit. It's between Detroit and the Grosse Pointes. So they made them go there instead of the Grosse Pointes, which are, upper middle class, high upper class neighborhood. So that's one instance of pure, we don't want you here. And we're going to pay these people not to bring you here. That's what happened. But then again, that was back in the 1970s, folks. They still do that today. But they have different laws and, they kind of cheat their way in and out of the system. But there are a lot of sundown towns. That's the topic of today. There are a lot of sundown towns that I will talk about later in my top 10 list. But for now, we're going to talk about 4 towns that I drive through, I would say not on a constant or daily basis, but I've driven through them enough to know that this is definitely a sundown town, or was a sundown town. Yes, I did my research on these 4 towns. 2 of them I did not know about the history until a few of my older colleagues told me about it. But Two of them I knew. Two of them I definitely knew. The first one we're going to talk about is Lathrop Village. Lathrop Village. Lathrop. I don't care how you say it. It was a sundown town. There was a Lathrop Village real estate brochure in the 1930s, I believe. It said, boasted that the new colony here has been restricted to race. All right. The entire school district is reserved exclusively for Caucasians. That's exactly what it said. Let me repeat it. Boasted that the colony here has been restricted as to race. The entire school district is reserved exclusively for Caucasians. Exclusively. So if anybody doesn't know, Lathrop Village is, I believe, is an enclave of Southfield. I believe it is. Let me see a map of Southfield. It's in there. I know it's in there. Southfield. Let me see. Yeah, it's inside Southfield. So between 11 and 12 Mile along Southfield Road. So yeah, it's about 1.5 miles, I guess. A small little city. But it's different than the rest of Southfield. Obviously for historical reasons that I just told you before. It's part of the exhibit. It was part of the exhibit of the We Don't Want Them Race and Housing in Metropolitan Detroit, 1900 to 1968 at Michigan State. Lathrop Village, Lathrop, said that their entire district is reserved for white people. So blacks couldn't send their kids there. We'll get to another school incident later when we talk about GP, Grosse Pointe. But we're going to go down Jefferson, and we're going to talk about Wyandotte. Now, a number of blacks who moved in during the early 1910s were driven out in 1916. All right. They killed a few people. They killed a few blacks. They killed us. There was a strike at the only business in town with black employees. They said they didn't want to work with them, that they need to get out of town. And this is an all-white suburb of Detroit. The local paper frequently noted through the 1920s that black residents were not welcome in the town. They was like, we don't want you here. We don't need you. We're better than you. If you drive through Wyandotte, there's a lot of, those big colonials, those big houses along Bill/Jefferson. I was like, yeah, this wasn't, not to go against black people having big houses, but no, this wasn't for the blacks. This was definitely a white town off the coast, off the Detroit River. Well, nowadays it's, there's more black people in Wyandotte, but not as much as there should be. But the historical, the historics that happened in Wyandotte pretty much scarred a lot of people to this day. Like, I went down there a few days ago. There was literally no black people. None whatsoever. During World War II, the government attempted to locate a housing project for black people, the black war workers in Wyandotte. But the city government, because government is made of the people of the city. The city government refused to make the housing project for the black workers. That was like, they can't stay here. They can go anywhere else, but they can't stay here. Oh, no. No, they can't. That's what they said. Speaking of, no, they can't stay here. We're going to talk about Grosse Pointe because I'm itching to talk about it. I go through this neighborhood because there's I think it's Grosse Pointe Woods, Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe Shores, Grosse Pointe Farms, Grosse Pointe, and then of course Grosse Eel downriver. Really nice houses, really nice. Nice view of the Lake St. Clair. Nice school system. Not as good as it used to be, but it's nicer than most. But on the school route, I think it was 1968. There's a story that Martin Luther King Jr. came to speak at a Grosse Pointe High School. He was frequently interrupted by hecklers. Frequently. He was trying to, preach peace and love and unity, equity, equality for all people. And they weren't having it. They was like, get out of here, you blackie. Get out of here. And that's what happened in 1983. The tennis team, including 2 African-American girls from Holy Name Catholic School in Birmingham, which is another Sundown town, visited Grosse Pointe to compete in a tennis match. The Grosse Pointe coach informed the Birmingham coach that Grosse Pointe could not play that day. The other coach asked why. Why can't we play today? And the other coach from Grosse Pointe said that you have 2 niggers with you. I remember looking. I believe it was Pride with Terrence Howard and Bernie Mac. That they like the uppity people, the white people from like the rich people. They came down to down to Philly to swim in their old rundown swimming pool, and it was like, oh, we can't swim here. And then, of course, the Philadelphia people said, okay, so you forfeit, right? Because you're not going to compete with us. And then the ref, which was obviously a white ref from out of town, was going to side with the white people and said they don't have to come here if they want to. They don't have to compete if they don't want to. They don't have to. Those were the times back in the day. But now we have it here in 1983. The 80s, not the 60s. This is the 80s. The Grosse Pointe coach informed the Birmingham coach that they could not play because you have 2 niggers with you. After an argument, the Birmingham team was finally allowed to play, which may have been the first time blacks were allowed to use the Grosse Pointe Tennis Club. I pass the Grosse Pointe Tennis Club often. I don't see any black people there. Those might have been the only 2 black people who've played there. You never know. Never know. 1983. That was only 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Well, speaking of 40 years ago, here's one that I did not know was a sundown town until I talked to my older colleagues. We're talking about Dearborn. Oh, Dearborn. If you look at Dearborn now, you wouldn't think it'd be a sundown town. However, back in the day, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, oh boy. If you were black caught in Dearborn, oh my gosh, I feel sorry for you. I mean, if you're caught in Dearborn now, I'd feel sorry for you too. But that's not the point. Orville Hubbard, which, Hubbard Drive is known for, the road between Ford Road and Michigan. He was the former mayor of Dearborn, and he was vocal and well known in his successful attempts to keep Dearborn quote unquote clean, meaning white, quote unquote. He wanted to keep the city white. What? We must keep the city white. In 1956, there was an interview with an Alabama newspaper, and Hubbard stated that they can't get in here. Every time we hear of a Negro moving in, we respond quicker than you do a fire. That is his exact words, ladies and gentlemen. Every time we hear of a new Negro moving in, we respond quicker than a fire. That means they were adamant of keeping black people out. And this wasn't just black people. He did it to, of course, he did it to the Jewish community, and he did it to the Eastern Europeans who were moving from I believe it was at the time it was the Polish and I forget what other nationality it was. They were moving from Southwest Detroit, like the Delray area, because that was a huge Polish concentration in Detroit. So in 1985, fast forward, Dearborn passed an ordinance limiting the use of public parks just to Dearborn residents, which was already a huge white population. So no blacks could be in the parks. And I believe in the 1980s and 1990s, you started to get your first Middle Easterns into Dearborn. So they couldn't go to the parks. Even though they were citizens, they still couldn't come to the parks. I'm going to say this again because this is a key quote from a mayor who has a freaking street named after him, which they need to work on those potholes. Just saying. They can't get in here. Every time we hear of a Negro moving in, we respond quicker than a fire. I was like, what? That means I gotta live on the low in Dearborn? Come on now. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Of course, all of this was to keep Dearborn white. Obviously, it didn't work. 2020. Dearborn enlisted the help of the Fair Housing Center, the FHC, in Detroit to attempt to make its housing practices more equitable. And just in 2005 to 2006, they had 8 racial discrimination housing lawsuits against them. This is not even 20 years ago, folks. Not even 20 years ago. Trying to keep people out because of what they look like. And of course, Dearborn now is one of the biggest concentrations of Middle Easterns outside of the Middle East. One of them. We have, I believe, the largest, either the largest or the second largest mosque outside of the Middle East. Off of Fort Road. It's huge. You can't miss it. But Dearborn has changed. Grosse Pointe has also changed, not as much as Dearborn or Lathrop Village or Wyandotte. But there's changes. There's strides being made. So out of the 4 sundown towns that I named, the worst one still to date would have to be Grosse Pointe, because they are very, very, very they just don't want people in there that aren't supposed to be in there, quote unquote. Wyandotte, of course, they have a mix of lower class poor, middle class, and upper class, all in Wyandotte. Lathrop Village, obviously not the same Lathrop Village back in the 60s or 30s when they said that the whole school district was exclusively for Caucasians. Totally different now. Dearborn, it's majority Arab. Small portions of whites still live on the west side of Dearborn. But if you look at Dearborn now, you would not think Sundown Town at all. But you need to know your history, folks. Because that's how these cities are shaped. So that was my spiel on sundown towns. You can look it up in your local city ordinance or local city histories. Because Detroit wasn't just a city that had it. Chicago had it. Philadelphia had it. Cleveland, New York City, even St. Louis, Los Angeles. Los Angeles was huge for this. Atlanta, Seattle, which Seattle and Portland were like notorious for discrimination in this country, believe it or not. But that was my what are sundown towns. And now we're gonna go segue over to my top 10 list. I wouldn't be excited about this, but I don't want to be excited about this list. But my top 10 sundown towns in Detroit. Number 10, of course, you have South Lyon / Howell. I will put Howell in there because they're in the sort of the same area. Not the same area, but Howell is much more north than South Lyon, but they both have the same history. Almost identical histories when it comes to blacks in those areas. South Lyon and Howell have been known, actually, they are known for KKK, Ku Klux Klan, and killing or discouraging black people in their cities. It's a fact. It's a fact. It's so bad between Detroit and Lansing that black people don't even want to stop at a rest stop, gas station, not even the Starbucks on Grand River in Brighton. You don't even want to stop there. That's how bad it is. But it gets worse as this list goes on. We have number 9, St. Clair Shores. I don't know if y'all know, but Grosse Pointe, St. Clair Shores, they're all in the same category. They want to keep us out. We were driving one time on Lake Shore into St. Clair Shores, and it was like they had huge MAGA gear, a MAGA gear like booth. Make America Great Again. I was like, wow, this is real. So yeah, they have a history of keeping black people out. Southgate, number 8, Southgate. Number 7, Sterling Heights, which also has the same history as Dearborn. Sterling Heights has a huge Arab population now. Also have a huge Middle East and Eastern European, I would say Eastern European / Middle East mix, like Turkish, Albanian, those kind of areas over there. You have Birmingham, which I said about earlier. Birmingham was a huge sundown town. It's equivalent to Grosse Pointe. There's not a lot of blacks. However, there are a lot of blacks in Birmingham. There's a lot of black businesses in Birmingham. However, it's very exclusive. Very exclusive. Wyandotte, like I said before, huge sundown town, making strides for a better world. Royal Oak, number 4. Royal Oak. Read your history books, folks. Read them history books. Royal Oak was huge for that. Grosse Pointe, like I said, all of the Grosse Pointes. Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe Farms, Grosse Pointe Woods, Grosse Pointe Shores, Grosse Ile, all of them. They all have the history of keeping blacks out, undesirables, and all that. Dearborn, like I said before, number 2, is probably the most. It's the only city that made a huge 180 from the sundown towns of the past. Now they're very. Now they're I want to say they're more inclusive. They like to invite everybody into the city, and it's working. And it's working for them. I think Dearborn is the second biggest city in the county. I believe so. I think it's third or fourth biggest in the state. It wouldn't happen without bringing all of his people in there. Colored folk, blacks, Arabs, Mexicans, Latinos. Bring them all in. Bring them, make a melting pot. That's what Dearborn is now. And now the opposite of melting pot. We're going to talk about what I talked about earlier in the "What You Doing, Detroit" section. We're going to talk about Livonia. That's my number one sundown town in Metro Detroit. It's so bad that a Facebook group had to raise money to make a freaking billboard to put on the side of the road to tell you, the uneducated people, or the people who know, that you're about to get pulled over because you're going to be racially profiled. That's crazy. That's crazy. And those were my top 10 historical sundown towns in Metro Detroit. And that has been another episode of the KrisCross Corner. Please listen and support the podcast. Please listen and support. You can do it better on the Anchor app. With as little as 99 cents a month, your listener support on the app helps me create more episodes. Subscribe to the KrisCross Studios on YouTube. Click that subscribe button. It's free. Just click it. More subscribers means more views on my videos. We also have other videos on the page. We also have different shows. We have the Great Debaters. We have Chris and Chris, the Only Amigos, and of course the KrisCross Corner. Follow me on Instagram, IG at _Chris_Cross_. Please spread the word about the podcast. Please spread the word. Like I said, listener support, which is at least $1 a month, 99 cents a month, can help me make more episodes. I'm getting better at this stuff, guys. Way better at this stuff. Remember, spread the word about the podcast. Know about your sundown towns, wherever you are in the world, especially in Metro Detroit, because that's where I'm headquartered. Stay safe, social distance, and be nice to each other.